So yesterday I showed you a version of this which had a whole bunch of wires all over the place. In this version I've added in an LCD display which shows the frequency of the output, and you can see here I also have everything wired into a single board, so everything is being connected together on this one board. On the other side of this you can see that I've soldered a few things together to make some connections. And so our next step is to try to make it so that we can have a nice little panel for this LCD display to sit, and also for the encoder to sit, so that all those wires can kind of be hidden and it's real easy for someone to just use this as intended. So I'm going to show you how we're going to build a little panel for this display and also this encoder, so that we can try to hide some of that ugly wiring. So a first step in putting this together is to make some measurements so that we know the actual dimensions of these two parts, which we're going to use to make our piece. So we're going to measure a few things. We're going to measure this dimension here for the display, this dimension here for those two holes. We're going to measure the diameter of those holes. So we're going to go to each one and make sure that they're the same. And we're also going to measure the specific dimensions of the screen itself. What I will probably do is make it so that this just sits on top of a piece of plastic, and we have those screw holes that just hold the thing in place. So this whole thing will just sit on top. And then over here for the encoder, we have to do the same thing. Actually, what we'll do is we'll find this distance between the two holes, and also find the dimension of the two holes, because that'll be a place to kind of cut a hole for this to be mounted on that top piece. The other thing that we'll do is we'll measure this diameter as well, just so that that can actually stick up through the top. Because the idea is that this would actually would have a piece of plastic. These would maybe sit side by side, something like that. We would use screws to attach these two to the top plate, and then this knob would actually be a hole that goes in the plastic and just extends through the top piece of plastic. So I'm going to take those dimensions and you're going to see them appear in the drawing in Onshape. This tool right here, I'm not going to do this in this video because I don't have my little stand to help me with this, but these calipers are really great for accurately determining these dimensions. So that's going to be really helpful moving forward. All right, so here we are inside Onshape. Let's get started. I'm going to create a new document, and I'm going to call this frequency generator. Just do that. So this is the main Onshape environment. I'm going to switch to the top view, and I'm going to make a sketch. I need to choose a sketch plane. I'm going to choose the top view to do that. And now, just to show you what happens here, I can draw things on this plane and then kind of change the perspective and look around. Like this is letting me draw in 3D on this specific top plane. I'm going to remove those and actually do my sketch. So what I figured out about this display is that this dimension between the holes is 30 millimeters, and this dimension here is 28. So, and I also need to get the diameter, so I take this little part and put it down into that hole and stretch it out, and so it looks like that diameter is just around, yeah, I think about 3 millimeters is good. So 3 millimeters is probably big enough to account for the size of that space in the display. So 4 holes, each one about 3 millimeters in diameter, and I have the spacing on each one. So let's sketch those out. So I'm going to make a circle. I'm going to click it there. I'm also going to change my workspace units to be in millimeters, so I can use this to lay everything out. And so if I go back into my sketch, I can go to the dimension tool. I can go to this circle. You can see right now it's set to 6.7 millimeters. I want that to be 3 millimeters. So we'll zoom in a little bit more. Okay. And now, because I have, I'm going to draw a couple more circles, and you'll see that I'm going to be very unspecific with their locations for now, because I'm going to set their dimensions using the dimensions tool. So with all 4 of those set, I'm going to go and set this to be 3 millimeters, this to be 3 millimeters as well, and this also to be 3 millimeters. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set some constraints so that I can control where these things are. The first thing I'm going to do is to set constraints. There's this nice menu right here. I'm going to create a horizontal constraint between the 2 centers of the circles so that those are in a clear line. I'm going to do the same thing with these 2. So I know that those will always be lined up. I'm also going to set up a vertical constraint between these 2 sets of circles. And so you can kind of see that now these are all forming a rectangle. And now that they are that way, I'm going to set their distances apart. So this right here, this is the longer dimension, so that's going to be 30 millimeters between those. And you'll notice that it moved both of these away to that distance. I'm also going to set this distance here to be 28 millimeters. Okay, and so now with those dimensions, I have set up those holes for the display, and I know that those are in the right location for this display to be represented. So I could cut out those holes from a surface and have the screw holes in the perfect location to be able to fit some screws through there. So let's do the same thing for the encoder. So what I found about this is that these holes are about 14 millimeters apart, and that the diameter, even though the diameter is a little bit smaller than 3 millimeters, I'm going to set those diameters to also be 3 millimeters, because even if the screw is a little bit bigger, that gives us a little bit of room to play with, so that we're sure that the screw will fit through wherever we place it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create those 2 mounting holes just on the other side of what you see here. So we'll make another circle. I'm going to move it over right about there. Okay, and I'm going to have a second circle as well. And as before, I'm just going to kind of place them randomly. I'll make that 3 millimeters, and this one also 3 millimeters. I'm going to set that vertical constraint between these 2 so that they always end up lined up. And now I'm going to set this distance between right now it's at 25, and so I want that to be 14 millimeters. Now, the way I have this right now, you'll notice that this is going to look like this. Here's the display, and here's the encoder. I haven't actually set the distance between these 2 things. That is something that I could potentially control. Right now, I'm just going to leave it as is, because I might find later on that it might make sense to have these a specific distance away. And right now, it doesn't really matter to me. what that distance is. So I'll just leave it where it was, just placing it down. And so having done that, I have now completed a sketch, and what I can do to this sketch is I can export it. I'm going to export it. I'm going to call this a function generator hole pattern. I'll make a DXF and download. And now I know that this is configured so that I can actually laser cut this using this drawing, because the software I use to do the laser cutting accepts a DXF file format. So I'm going to go try to do that. That's all there is to using Onshape to lay out a hole pattern.